Welcome to the My Friend the Friar podcast, and thanks for listening. If you like My Friend the Friar and want to support us, please consider subscribing or following us if you haven't already done so. And if you found us on YouTube, then don't forget to click the notification bell when you subscribe so you'll be notified of new episodes when they release. Thanks again, and God bless. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me and my friend the Friar, Father Stephen Sanchez, a Discalced Carmelite priest. Good morning, Father.
Good morning, John. How are you?
Oh, I'm sleepy. I did not sleep well. I only got like 5 hours of sleep last night. And
that time of year. Yep. Everything's changing. And spring, daylight savings time. Circadian rhythms are off. Yeah.
We have a special guest. Bertha is joining us again.
Oh, Bertha.
Hi, kitty. What's funny is she was sleeping in the living room. All the pets are asleep. Everyone's sleeping. And as soon as I close the door, don't step on the keyboard. And, oh my gosh. It's the last thing I need is for her to step on the keyboard and cancel the recording or whatever. Yes, as soon as I close the door, it's like her radar went off that there was a door closed between myself and her, and she had to come to me. And so here she is. Hi, kitty. Okay. Goodness. Yeah, so hopefully on little sleep and lots of coffee, we can have an interesting conversation this morning.
4 cups.
And are you on your 4th?
I finished my 4th. I've been up since 3:30, so like,
Oh gosh. Yeah, I slept till 6, but it's because I couldn't fall asleep till after midnight, so I was just like wired for some reason. I don't know. But I'm only on my 2nd. Well, we'll see how it goes. Yeah. This might be a little bit of a loopy episode.
Yeah. Manic. Okay.
Yeah. We so the other day we were talking about how our Christian anthropology influenced, or I don't know if influence is the right word, but how it has an effect on worship.
Yeah,
right.
Liturgy. Yes, we spoke
and and we were talking about sacrifice a lot. And when we were done recording, I went out and I was working in our garden kind of thing, and I was weeding, and it came to mind. I don't know, years ago, one of our episodes, probably in season 1, I feel like I had this metaphor about gardening and God that I talked to you about. And I don't know, it's kind of fuzzy because it was a while ago. But anyway, what's funny is it came back to me, and I'm weeding and preparing this garden bed. The only thing I could think of was kind of how, I guess, wretched of a sinner I am. Like how badly I need a savior. And like, because the grass I'm trying to pull, I showed you pictures, right? There's like roots everywhere.
Yes, mostly. Yeah, you don't have a yard. You have Bermuda grass roots or Johnson grass roots, whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever they are, yeah. So I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, everyone, like you can't get the whole thing. You can get like the main part, and then it leaves all these little bits, like little root bits back, in the soil and stuff like that. And you just hope they don't come back, because if any little bit happens to have enough energy in it, it'll just start a whole new thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm pulling these things out, and I'm struggling, and I'm, half killing myself, from exhaustion or exertion out there. And I'm just thinking, like, how much that's like going to confession and
pulling out the weeds.
How often, yeah. Well, like, and it's like, oh my gosh, I have been here before for this sin. Why is it still here? And it's not that I'm not forgiven, and it's not that I'm not healed. It's that for some reason, I guess, be it God's providence or my the participation on my part, right? The faith on my part, that some little bit gets left behind. And it's like, how do you get all the way? How do you get all that out? You know, and because I'm putting a lot of effort in getting these dang weeds out of the ground, or the grass roots out of the ground, and all I can think is God does way better job than I do, and yet the little root bits remain. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, just something that popped in my head.
Well, part of it too is it's not so much repeating the same sin. It's being it's stumbling over the same type of sin, the same temptation, right? So whatever it is that we're striving for, we're always looking for a good. And so sometimes the sin is our way of trying to reach the good or striving for a good, but in a misplaced way. And so that's when we choose badly, which winds up being sin. So it's never so much the same sin as much as it is the same weakness, or the same area of weakness, or the same area where the enemy continues to tempt me, or to talk me into seeking a shortcut to the good through this particular way. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, there's nothing I can do now about the things I did in my growing up, which like deeply embedded these kind of mannerisms or behaviors or mentalities, right? And so these things are so ingrained where, I guess, thankful at least now in my life, I can recognize them, you know, and go, yeah, that's not helpful at all, kind of thing, you know. And I think I would gladly go to, and here's maybe a confession question for you. I would gladly go to confession every day for the same thing than not be able to see that I'm sinful in this way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which I guess to my confession question that popped in my head, is it wrong to just want to go and say like, Jesus, I love you. Like I need you. And it's not that, like, let's say like pride is, because you don't want to abuse the sacrament, right?
No, you
It's
don't.
like, let's say, you know, you're prideful and, you know, you went yesterday and it's not that
you might take off the priest you're going to every day.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's not that it's just that
there is such a thing. There is such a thing as
for closeness.
Confession of devotion, that is, because the sacrament of reconciliation is a healing sacrament. There is such a thing as a reconciliation of devotion, that is, because you want to go because you want to receive this healing grace. But again, it's the other question to bring it into balance is prudence, temperance, right? You don't want to be scrupulous about it, but you also don't want to be you don't want to suffer from spiritual gluttony, like, I want more. So you don't want to do that either. So, yeah. Interesting question.
Yeah, because like you can't, you can receive the Eucharist daily, right? So if you want that communion daily, why wouldn't you just want all of Jesus all the time? You know what I'm saying?
Amen.
But I guess if you feel that way, you should probably just go become a Carmelite friar.
There you go. Or stop sinning. One of the two.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Carmelite friars, the whole point of our conversation today is I had stumbled across something about St. John of the Cross once upon a time. Like, I know who the guy is, and you know how we're
the guy?
Like, we should write
the guy?
down.
Did you just say
Yeah.
the guy?
Yeah.
I know who the guy is.
That dude. But anyway, so I literally wrote it down. I finally did it and said, let's
You
talk
wrote
about
something
St. John of the
down.
Cross.
Wow.
But I don't remember exactly what the trigger was. So I know that I wanted to talk about him, and I did a little bit of research kind of thing, just kind of see if I could put together a framework. But this guy is kind of a big deal to you. So
yeah,
I was wondering
sort
if
of.
maybe you, yeah, could you give us some kind of like primer on
didn't
because
I think it
one
might have
thing
come
I've
up
heard
when
you
we were
say
doing
too, and
when
I've
we were
heard
doing the introduction to Carmelite spirituality. That probably was where
that
this
may have
came
been
up.
it. Yeah. But I've heard you say, and I've heard other people say that he can be very challenging.
Oh,
I guess is the way
yeah,
to say it,
very much.
because he's very intellectual. He's contemplative, but he wrote poetry apparently too, and stuff like that, right? So anyway, I just figured if somebody can kind of ease me into St. John of the Cross, it'd be you. So anyway, who is this guy? When did he live? You know, all that. Like, let's just start at the beginning, kind of thing.
In the beginning.
Wait, hold on. Yeah, why do you like him so much?
Why do I like him so much?
Yeah, because you have a relic, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
So
when you read John of the Cross, it's like hitting you with a 2x4 of truth, and it's shocking. It's very frank, scary, but also very attractive because he's speaking the truth. So, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot about John. A lot.
did you know about him before? So when you were
Discerning.
discerning to even become a priest, right? Were at the time, did you go not just I want to be a priest, I want to be a Carmelite priest, or were you just thinking priest first and then
I was thinking
Carmelite came
religious
later and
first, right? Priest was sort of a secondary thing. It was also there. I didn't really know that you could be a religious priest. But anyway, as I was making my discernment, I did run across towards almost towards at the bottom of the list of orders that I was considering. It was Carmel because I just sort of providentially ran across some literature on Carmelite spirituality, the scapular, Teresa and John, and so that's how I became interested, and then became very interested and did some more reading on both Teresa and John and Carmelite spirituality. It all goes back to, in a very weird way, El Greco, because I was very fascinated, and still am fascinated by El Greco and El Greco's paintings. And so that's how I ran across Carmelite spirituality. It's a long story. I don't have time for that right now. So anyway.
yeah, you need at least 6 cups of coffee for that.
Yeah. Maybe in the afternoon when I'm really awake. But anyway, and so.
But okay, so you kind of stumbled across him on in your interest for Carmel, and that's kind of where you fell in love, so to speak.
So,
all right.
Both Teresa and John, when we talked about introduction to Carmelite spirituality, we talked about the beginnings of the order in the 1200s in the East, on Mount Carmel, Crusaders. We did all that. So if you're interested, you can find that episode and download that. But as the church was going through Reformation, coming out of what we used to call the Dark Ages, and society was trying to climb out of the pits after different plagues, black plagues, and hundreds of years of war and famine and pestilence and everything that came from the wars, all that stuff. As it was climbing out of that, there began this reform. And so Teresa and John, they're from what they call the Golden Age of Spain, which is mid-1500s to mid-1600s. And so there was...
This is right after all the... we have, I don't know, 137 competing popes at the same time kind of thing.
After the great, the one of the schisms and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. So this is all right after that. I think that there's kind of this mentality of, okay, let's step back and kind of
let's catch a breath and start again. So in at this point in Spain, at this time in history, there was already a movement of Reformation that had taken root due to the insistence of Ferdinand and Isabel of Spain, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabel of Castile, And under their influence, and under the influence and brilliance of Cardinal Cisneros, who happened to be Franciscan, um, they began this Reformation. The idea of Reformation was something that was going around the church several places, different times in history, but it never really took root because the papacy wasn't that centralized yet. There wasn't that, and communication, again, a difficulty in communication, that was part of the problem as well. So Ferdinand and Isabella decided that they were going to reform the church in Spain with the permission of the Pope, and they began this Reformation with Cardinal Cisneros, who put together a polyglot Bible, one of the great things that he did, but also began the reform of the church with the bishops. Started with the bishops reforming the bishops, and their idea was by reforming the clergy, the presbyterate, then the Reformation will trickle down towards the people. We need to reform the clergy first. So that's where all that started, right? And so it was established by these Catholic monarchs, right? And so there you have the reform. You also had the beginning of the Spanish Inquisition that was started by the Catholic monarchs. And it was mostly a concern that a lot of the conversos, the converts, were converts in name only. Because if you remember, Ferdinand and Isabel, they wanted to unify the kingdom under the faith, and so they conquered the Muslims, and they had the Jews also expelled. And so, if you wanted to stay in Spain, you had to be Catholic, and so people were converting to Catholicism in name only, just so they didn't have to move, but they weren't really practicing.
Yeah.
So that was part of that understanding of sort of that. That was the spur of that Inquisition. So anyway, all of this is happening. There's this whole, the spirit is moving, and there's this Reformation spirit going on. And then we have Teresa begin the Reformation of the nuns, and then also with John, she begins the Reformation of the friars. And that's a little complicated story. So one of these days we'll just do a dive into just the Reformation itself of the order, the Discalced Reformation.
Yeah.
Also, in Teresa of Jesus, she had already begun the reform of the nuns with the establishment of San Jose de Avila with her nuns in a small monastery. So when Teresa meets John, she meets John in Medina del Campo. He was already a Carmelite friar. He had gone to Medina del Campo to sing his first Mass in 1567. And so this is when they meet. And so also at this time, the Council of Trent, the Reformation Council of Trent was already reverberating through Europe. The Council of Trent was from 1545 to 1563. So there's this air of Reformation and this ardor to recommit and to relive this Catholic faith, right? So this is where then Teresa and John meets, and then John tells Teresa that he's not happy with the religious life as a Carmelite. This is before the Reformation, before the Discalced Reform. And he's not happy, and that he's going to join the Carthusians. He's thinking of joining the Carthusians. And Teresa asks him to wait because she has in mind not just the Reformation of the nuns, but also the Reformation of the friars. And John says he'll wait as long as she doesn't take too long. So he was like, he wanted to get going. So
impatient much?
Yeah. So he learns patience. He learns. But he was really he really wanted to live a life, offer his life to the Lord in that complete gift, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think's really cool here, though, is that there's time and time again throughout church history where it is a woman who has such a powerful effect on the church and the faithful, you know?
Yeah. She was a powerhouse, to say the least.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we were talking about suffering and John's understanding of suffering. This is an interesting question. It's something that I always wrestle with. So the understanding of John's suffering, for me, raises the question of resilience in an individual's understanding of the world that surrounds them, right? And for me, I'm always puzzled by families, right, and siblings, right, and how some are more resilient than others. They're raised in the same family. Some are really traumatized. Others escape with scars, but escape and much more resilient and are not as weighed down by things, right? So this is the whole question that always pops up in my head. So John is born into a situation of poverty. Again, as I said, the society is climbing out of poverty, out of wars. And so John was born into a situation of poverty. And so in Spain, you have the very rich and the very poor. You have class entitlement, right? And so this class entitlement, the aristocracy and this poverty, there's this spirituality there, right? There's also this Catholic Christian spirituality that kind of hovers over the situation, right? And it's, as it is today, in a continuum. Some people really got Catholicism and spirituality, and others didn't. Some were, as there are today, some were culturally Catholic Christian, and some understood the radical nature of the gospel. So during this time of Spain, during this golden age of Spain, there were many, many, many saints that came out of Spain, as well as many criminals that oppressed and exploited the poor and the helpless. So again, this is a very complicated question. It's hard to paint in broad brushstrokes without calling to mind, like, yeah, well, not everybody was 1,000% into the gospel. So, and this is the situation that John finds himself. And going back to this whole idea of resiliency, I would posit that John's understanding of suffering and faith came largely by what was modeled for him by his family life, largely his mother and older brother Francisco. For John, the foundation of life and his world perspective was based on the love he himself experienced and witnessed in his family. His dad died when he was very young. His dad came from a very wealthy family, but his dad fell in love with a poor weaver, silk weaver, and we also now believe that she was not a full blood. In other words, she was part Muslim. She had some Arabic blood in her, and so in those days, the leading science was that you had this in your blood. So if you were of Christian blood, you had Christianity, but if you were of mixed blood, then either your Jewish blood or your Arabic blood or your whatever blood would rise up, right? And it'd be sort of like a natural inclination you would have. So anyway, because she was not full-blooded and because she was of a lower class, his father disowned him.
So there's, I was gonna say, so his dad lost everything that he.
His father was disowned. They had nothing to do with him. They wouldn't help. Nothing. And so John's dad had to learn how to beg, how to weave. His wife, Catalina, taught him how to weave silk. But what happens is after they get married and they have this, they're in love, and it is a marriage of love, and nothing, there's no class distinction or anything because he's so in love with Catalina, they're so in love with each other. Anyway, what happens is he falls ill and he dies after a couple of years. And it sort of devastates the family, trying to keep him healthy, trying to keep him alive. And so then all of a sudden they find themselves begging out in the streets.
Yeah.
And so Catalina has to walking because there's no buses, there's no like mass transit, right? There's no public transit. Yeah. So they have to walk to different places begging for money. They get turned away by John of the Cross's dad's family. I forgot John of the Cross's name. I want to say Diego, but I'm not sure if it is. Anyway, his family, turns them away, rejects them, and so they're begging. They're just begging, right? And so eventually, they wind up going to Medina del Campo, which was a very bustling commercial place, and so Catalina finds a job there. Francisco, the eldest brother, is there. The brother born between Francisco and John dies from malnutrition. Um, so this is all part of this. This is what John sees, but John sees mostly the love that his mom has for him and for his brother, the love that his mom and his dad had for each other, that love made everything fine. Yeah, they were poor, they were destitute, but love made everything fine. And so this is where I think John's understanding of suffering comes in. He sees everything then through this love, right? This is the experience that he had. So I think this is where a lot of that understanding of commitment is. Are you? We would say today, all in, right? You just all in to this relationship and this commitment.
So does he tie that suffering and that poverty and then the love he experienced from his parents and witnessed in his parents somehow to Jesus? Or
Oh yeah, because again, it was a very Catholic culture, right? It was a very Catholic family. John of the Cross used to introduce his older brother Francisco as the greatest treasure God had ever given him. Francisco was a very good, pious man. He was married to a very holy woman. And Francisco and his wife would spend their days looking and going around, finding abandoned children because of the poverty. People would just abandon their children, and they would claim all these abandoned children and find families for them. And so, I mean, they're like godparents for like hundreds and hundreds of children in the registers because they're finding all these families, right? So they're very committed, the social aspect of Catholicism. And so this is what John is living. And so John sees this, and this is being modeled by his brother and by his mom, this concern, this love, this that even in poverty and suffering, that it's all about living out our faith, living out our commitment to the gospel and the gospel way of life.
is that what makes him want to join the religious life? I know a lot of people, it was like your choices were you can go be a soldier, or you can go be a priest, or you can go be a farmer. You know what
Pretty much, yeah. Back in those days, there's very little in terms of. I mean, if you weren't in the middle class, then it was hard for you to do anything if you weren't in the middle class or the mercantile class. So John, because he's poor, he winds up getting a free education. But as this free education, Colegio de la Doctrina, getting this free education, he has to go beg for this institute that is an institute of learning for the poor. He learns this. He's a altar boy at I think it's a monastery of Poor Clares or Augustinian nuns, I forget now. He also assists at the Mass for the Jesuit house because this is where he's learning his education. The Jesuits are running the school. At time he goes and helps also at a hospital for people that are suffering from syphilis, late stages of syphilis. So he goes and tends them to care for the sick and the dying and to beg for that sort of hospital clinic thing. So there's all this, he's surrounded by all these different needs and different religious institutes. But it's really interesting that we never really know why he picked Carmel. We have absolutely no idea. All we know is that when he was 20, 21, he just went to the monastery at St. Anne's monastery of the Carmel and asked to enter. And so he enters. So like it was sort of like, that's interesting. We don't have any idea as to why, but this is where he went.
So a word on the street is he gets himself in a little bit of trouble with his brothers after he joins. So like how long, like kind of frame that up for us and then tell us what happened.
So Teresa began the reform of the friars in 1568, and John was part of that. He was the first Him and Antonio de Hereda and one other brother were the first friars of the Reform. And so they begin to live in Duduelo in 1568, in November of 1568. So a year after he meets Teresa, right? And then they begin the Reform. They're living the Reform. They're living outside in the country, in a very poor place. An old barn that somebody had given them, and so it was very austere, very poor. So they begin to live the Reform, and all of a sudden, because there's this air of reform in the church, in the culture, everywhere, this whole idea of Trent and everything, everybody's excited about the religious reform, and so people start joining the Reform. And as people start joining the Reform, it becomes much more popular, and as it becomes much more popular, the friars of the ancient observance, so the friars that John leaves, the ancient observance is the title, and John joins the Discalced. So then the friars of the ancient observance were offended that John felt that there needed to be reformation, and so of course there's all this sibling rivalry and tension and fighting as only brothers can fight. And so what happens then is one night while John is confessor to the nuns of the Incarnation in, I think it's in 1577, the friars of the ancient observance, what they do is they go and they kidnap him. They break into his little hut where he's living, and they kidnap him. They blindfold him. They throw him in a carriage, and he's off into the night. He has absolutely no idea where he is. And so what happens is that these friars take him to Toledo, and he's thrown into a prison cell, in a little 10 by 6 foot prison cell. And he was a prisoner for 9 months. Nobody knew where he was. Teresa was frantic. She couldn't find him. She was writing letters to the king. She was writing letters to bishops. She was writing letters to Pope. She was just absolutely frantic about what happened to John. And of course, the friars of the ancient observance weren't saying anything like, yeah, we took him. Like, no, they didn't say anything like that. So they had him in Toledo, where he suffered for 9 months. He would be taken out and he would be flogged in the refectory. He was not allowed to celebrate Mass. He was not allowed to pray his breviary, which back then was considered a mortal sin. So he suffered a great deal. And they're trying to convince him to give up the Reform. So they're trying to convince him to give up the Reform. They would speak outside of the cell, talking about how everybody had given up the Reform, and friars were leaving the Reform, and the nuns were leaving the Reform, to make him sort of despair and sort of himself also gave up the Reform. So this was part of his suffering. There's this suffering in this dark cell, in this prison, abandoned, not being able to celebrate the Mass, not being able to pray the liturgy, being out and being flogged by the community every day. This was a very, very, very dark time for him, but he didn't fall into despair. So this is interesting in that it is during his imprisonment in Toledo that he begins to compose some poems, which he later writes down. He began to write some of them down. One of the prison guards, one of the guards, felt very sorry for him and actually gave him paper and something to write with, and I think maybe even a candle, so he wouldn't be sitting in the dark forever. And so he began to write some of these poems. The most popular poems in Catholicism are The Dark Night of the Soul, The Spiritual Canticle, and The Living Flame of Love. But they're popular because he wrote commentaries on them. He wrote prose commentaries on these poems. But his poem, How Well I Know the Font, which is a reflection on the Eucharist, and the poem, The Little Shepherd, which is a reflection on the Good Shepherd, are just as deep and important, right? So there's this spirituality of he is committed to his relationship to the Lord. He's committed to this reformation of religious life, and it doesn't matter what he suffers because he feels that this is what God is asking of him, and he's committed to this service, the service to the order and the service to the Lord. And so this is then part of this whole understanding of suffering, is that it is a purification from our inclinations, a purification from our appetites, our preferences. And so since he was stripped of everything, he began to be more objective about these things that he saw and was able to be reflective about it. But again, that has to do with the fact that his domestic church was taught him to trust in God and to love God. And so he was able to see it through that lens instead of despairing, because other people would have become bitter and despaired and would have gladly given up everything to be able to take a shower and celebrate Mass and whatever. So, that's
kind of interesting. Yeah, that's it. I can see that. It's like, well, it's like, well, life sucks anyway. So that being kidnapped by my brothers and thrown in jail is just kind of par for the course, you know? So it's like, let me reflect on this instead of complaining, you know? That's funny. That's so funny. So which is of his writings, do you have a favorite or one that really speaks to you most, or is a little bit here, a little bit there?
Yeah, I would say it's like it's like the Second Vatican Council documents. It's all context. They're all written. So the Dark Knight commentary is the Dark Knight and the Spiritual Canticle and the Living Flame of Love. They're all poems that are actually connected to each other. So they're all interconnected in terms of the journey of the soul towards God. So yeah, I would have to say probably the most beautiful is Living Flame of Love, which is sort of reaching the summit of union, right? The most difficult and challenging is the Dark Knight, which is about the purgation or the ascetical part of the journey, right? And then those two are the poles of the continuum, right? Of the difficulty of purification, but also Living Flame of Love, where the Holy Spirit is illuminating and dwelling in the soul. That is a beautiful point. That's the goal that we're striving for. So it's between the goal that we're striving for, the Living Flame of Love, union with the Lord, and then the journey, the Dark Night of the soul is like, yeah, but I need to clear my heart of all those things that stand in the way of me being empty enough to receive the fullness of that love. So it's interesting. I would say if you want to read John, first read a good biography or a couple of biographies on John, then read his poetry, and then read his letters, the few letters that there are, so you can get an idea of who he is and some of his themes, and then you can start very slowly with reading some of the larger prose commentaries.
So people say that John is hard to read, and sometimes you have older documents and it's hard to read because you're translating it from one language to another. That makes it hard to read because the translation isn't really well done, or because you can translate for like word for word, or you can translate for meaning, right? And so sometimes the translation isn't very helpful, or maybe it's their writing style is kind of difficult for our modern reader to understand. So, or to follow along with. So is he difficult because it's something like that? Or is he difficult because it's the kind of thing you can only read so much and then you have to sit back and think about what
it's very dense. It's difficulty because it's dense. There's a lot of theological suppositions that he's making. Again, because it's a Catholic culture. So he's assuming a lot of things. He's assuming that you're living a spiritual life. He's assuming you're living a sacramental life. He's assuming you're studying scripture, reading scripture, praying with scripture. There's a lot of things that he's presupposing. And so he's not writing for beginners either. He goes like, if you want to, there's lots of books on the beginning of prayer, but this is for those that have already committed to that life, committed to that discipleship. And so there's a lot of things that he presupposes, but also he's very dense in terms of the theological presentation is something that needs to you need time to sort of sit with and chew, right? And ponder. For example, the whole idea of the dark night, he says it's one night, it's one long night, but there are different parts of the night, which is the purgation, the emptying of the heart to be able to receive the Lord in his fullness. And so there is the purgation of the senses. There is the purgation of the spirit. And in the purgation of the senses, there is the passive purgation, but there's also active purgation. In the purgation of the spirit, the soul, there's also an active purgation and a passive purgation. For some people, talk about then 4 nights, but it's actually 1 night. So it gets complicated. So then the dark night of the soul, right, is this understanding of. So there's the ascent of Mount Carmel, which is the first part, and then there's the dark night of the soul, which is the second part. Then there's the spiritual canticle, and then the living flame of love. So they're all the continuum. The very beginning part, the very first part, is the ascent of Mount Carmel, which is the purgation of the senses in the beginning, both active and passive, and a little bit of spiritual purgation. Then dark night of the soul is about the purgation of the spiritual person. This is where he talks about spiritual gluttony, spiritual pride, spiritual envy, and the 7 capital sins, but on the spiritual level. So it can get overwhelming. So you do need somebody to guide you through, and somebody that can help you maneuver your way through the work.
Yeah, it sounds like the kind of thing where I used to kind of chuckle at people who, let's say you're some kind of literature, major at university, and it's like, oh, well, my area of focus is J.R.R. Tolkien, right? And so it's like, wait, you got a degree in like one guy, So I used to chuckle at that, but now the older, and the older I've gotten, and the more, I guess, exposure I've gotten to certain things, you start to realize, oh wow, because you can spend forever trying to understand everything. And it seems like John is probably one of those guys you could probably go get a theology degree with an area of focus of John of the Cross.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. St. John Paul II wrote his discourse on faith in John of the Cross.
Maybe that'll be something. We should write that down. Go look that up. And forget about it.
15 episodes on John Paul's dissertation on faith in John of the Cross. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Have you read it?
No. I struggle with John of the Cross.
It's too hard. That's funny. So from because Dark Knight's not, like you're saying, he wrote a lot. Is there any kind of big takeaway from, or I don't know, like big takeaway, but his Dark Night of the Soul, is there anything today that like just kind of how do I say it? Something that maybe stands out or is relevant or encouraging to us, or maybe something we could focus on nowadays?
Yeah. I think encouragement would be maybe for those who already feel that there is something wrong with the culture and the society. And so I would say encouragement is a strong word for just the culture in general. I would say that the idea of purgation, the idea of the dark night, can be a lesson to our culture that is so focused on materialism and consumerism, and that is not where our value is, and that's not where identity is. And so the dark night addresses a more fundamental question of self-awareness. We're talking about Imago Dei. We are made in the image and likeness of God. So this is part of that understanding, the capacity of the soul to have God, but also it is necessary to have self-objectivity and self-correction. So these are the things that our dominant culture is in need of, our present-day Catholics, right? We tend to get caught up in doing and action and the immediate results, right? That's what we want. We want to go out and slay the dragon, and I want to be able to see the dragon and the dragon's blood on my sword. Like, well, it's not so much about that, but that has its place, but that's not everything.
Yeah, and in our culture too, we're very how do I say it? Maybe like hedonistic, the pursuit of happiness, right? We're very focused
the pursuit of
on
pleasure,
that.
Yeah. And so he sort of focuses on being able to be aware of that and incline yourself to not allow yourself to be mastered by pleasure and your pursuit of pleasure.
Yeah. So he wrote some other things though too. I guess briefly, since we've been talking for a little bit. Let's see. I looked up the spiritual canticle. That's different than this collection. And then I guess he wrote some other poetry.
Of the spiritual canticle the spiritual canticle would be after the Dark Night. So it's the ascent of Mount Carmel, then the dark night of the soul, then the spiritual canticle, then the living flame of love. Those are the
okay. So it's part
the
of
four
those.
main works. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did he write anything outside of those?
He wrote lots of poetry. There's a romance. There's poetry, small poems. He wrote. There's collections of his sayings, sayings of light and love, maxims and counsels. There's some advice to religious. There's some minor works in poetry that he didn't write any commentary on, and that's why they're not popular, because the four big popular works are his commentary on those poems, right? So,
yeah. Why do you think he chose
poems?
Yeah, sorry. Why do you think he chose poetry?
I think he's trying to name the unnameable, trying to express the ineffable. He uses imagery, right? So it is the artistic license of the poet to use imagery, trying to name something beyond themselves. So yeah. So he uses all sorts of water, fire, forests, flowers. He uses all sorts of images in his poetry.
So you just guess where some Johns feel the inclination towards apocalyptic literature, and some Johns feel the inclination to flowery poetry, huh?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, so any final thoughts? I have a squirrel kind of moment, but any kind of closing final thoughts that you have on John?
Read his poetry. Find his poetry. You can find the poetry of John of the Cross, and you can probably find it online, and just read through that. And if you can read Spanish, read the Spanish poetry. He's still considered, even to today, in today's literature of Spain, he's still considered one of the masters of poetry.
Is there anything he's like a patron saint of, where people might ask his intercession if they're experiencing certain things?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Betty. Betty is the
she would know something.
She's the
random.
expert on those things, right? So
Just figured maybe he's like patron saint of suffering.
Dark Knights,
something like that. Yeah, Dark Knights. Patron saint of Batman. Okay, squirrel question.
Okay.
Is that a reciprocating saw on the floor in your bedroom behind you?
It's a drill, actually.
Oh, is it a drill? I was like, what the heck do you have a saw in your bedroom for? What do you have a drill for? What are you doing?
I'm drilling some tiny holes in our cement wall so I can hang some of my art.
I guess that makes sense. I'm just wanting to make sure you're not trying to drill like breathing holes in the wall so you guys can go kidnap one of your Carmelite brothers from San Antonio or something and throw him in jail.
Prison cells.
Yeah.
So we want to let him breathe. I mean, you know.
That's so funny. Sorry, yeah, you're talking and all of a sudden in the background I was like, is that a saw on the floor? What is that?
it's a drill, John. It's a drill. Squirrel.
Oh,
I think you need more coffee, or you've had too much coffee.
No, I still haven't even finished my second, so that's probably what I'm going to do is get one more and go stand in the backyard and look at the flower bed now and try to motivate myself to get back to work. This is my dark night of the dark night of the
dark night of the garden.
Yeah, or the garden. Oh gosh. Okay. My goodness.
Okay.
Well, this is good. Thanks. I feel like I actually know a little bit something about
John.
Yeah, maybe next time I come out there and visit, I'll as long as you don't throw me in the dungeon, maybe I'll see if you got a book I could borrow.
Okay.
Or if you do throw me in the dungeon, just throw me in with the book.
You'll have breathing holes. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I love you. Thanks for playing. All right. Everybody, thanks for joining us.
God bless.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.